Welcome, friends,
to the How-To Heretic.
I'm Uncle Mark.
And I'm Uncle Dan. And I'm Uncle Doug.
And this is your user's guide to life on the outside.
That's right. Leaving religion is the first step into a larger, better world.
But it can also be a scary world. Ooh. Things work differently now.
Hey, never fear. That's why we're here.
We're your audio uncles. And with help from good friends and experts in all sorts of fields,
we're going to share the stories and seek the knowledge to build a great life.
After all, you only get the one that we know of, so you better make the most of it.
Yahoo!
Well, Uncle.
Yeah, it's just me.
How are you, Dan?
I'm doing okay. I feel a weight lifted from the program.
There is a big ginger monkey that's not on our backs today, and that is the big grape ape. That is Uncle Doug. Has a a very busy moment in his day job life, and likes to rub in our faces that he has a day job, so he's doing that. And so we're Douglas today. Yeah.
And don't worry, there's nothing suspicious about that. It is exactly what we say it is, and he's definitely okay and not in jail.
Yeah. So bail money is a thing we're going to be talking about later in the show, but it's not for Doug.
Not for Doug. No, it's
Nope.
just give us. Think about giving us some extra money, especially if you like Uncle Doug, for no apparent reason.
$250,000 is a huge Patreon goal, but I think we can do it.
I think we can make it.
Yeah, and we need it by sundown. So, well, it's a good show this week. We're going to have some fun.
Yeah, I'm gonna talk to us a little bit about one of the worst concepts that religion has given us.
And then we have a very special guest on, Linda Kay Klein, who is going to talk about another of the worst concepts that religion has certainly perfected, if not necessarily invented.
Yeah,
and she's going to talk to us about her field of expertise, which is purity culture.
Oh yeah, it's one that y'all have been waiting for.
Yeah, so if you want to play the big shame game, join us. Join us for that interview.
Yeah.
And, just one, we won't be talking about this again directly, but this is the last this will be the last public airing of the podcast before November 3rd. For those of you not in America, pray for us.
Get it over with.
And for those of us in America, please fucking vote. Please vote.
Right.
And
you know who you have to vote for. Don't fuck around.
Yeah.
Kanye is not a real option.
Kanye's not a real thing.
Kanye's not even a human.
Yeah.
Doesn't exist.
Yeah. He's not. He's barely a Kardashian. So please do that. And fingers crossed. We'll see you all on the other side. And let's do a show. Well, Uncle Doug.
And silence reigns.
Oh, no. Fuck. What happened to Doug?
There is no Uncle Doug.
Ooh. Well, it is I think it is our last podcast before Halloween, Daniel.
This is the spooktacular, so, if
Doug's
we
going
have
missing.
One ghost uncle, then
yes.
This we'll just call this whole show Haunted.
Well, right before we started recording, we decided to split up. So I don't know what's going on. Anyway, we don't have Doug this week.
Exactly. We told Doug to go into the basement. He should be fine,
as we've mentioned. But there's a lot of belief out there, Dan. And ask me, maybe there's too much.
There's a lot to be believed. There's a lot to believe or not believe.
Yeah,
as pleases you.
I think there's more things. There's more belief than there really are things to believe in. I'll leave it at that.
Well, there's definitely that.
Yeah.
I think that's probably true.
I'll leave it at that.
And to that end, I will say this. We've talked a lot about various woos and weirdo beliefs over the years. And we've come out as being, well, let's say against them. We are anti them. They tend to be based on nothing more than magical thinking and confirmation bias. And frequently, they do more harm than good. Am I right? Can I get an amen?
Hallelujah.
Okay, well done. This does beg the question, though. Why are we so negative, Uncle Mark? The world is full of abundance, the universe. Why can't we be a little more open-minded?
Yeah, let's do it. Where do we start?
Well, here's where we start. I'm going to tell you about an amazing health treatment, and I want you to be really fair on this. I want you to give it a really good listen, okay?
Well, I've already taken all the hydroxychloroquine I can stomach, so I hope this is
No.
else.
This is better.
Okay.
Open that closed little mind of yours as far as you possibly can, because I promise you that this works.
Okay.
I know it works because it has worked for me and for millions of other people who will testify under oath that it works. Hell, we'll all take and pass lie detector tests that it works and will be the most remarkable thing you've ever experienced.
As long as it's not a urine test, I'm fine.
There's no urine involved.
Okay.
Matter of fact, you may never urinate again.
That would be awesome.
Yeah. For you, that would be especially.
Fucking dream. Are you kidding me?
That's 6 hours of your day back.
Yeah.
So, are you ready for this? Here it comes.
Let's do it.
Armpit fish. That's right. I know it sounds crazy, but you promised to be open-minded, so here we go. This is legit.
Okay, I'm in.
Do you have back trouble? Armpit fish.
Okay.
Do you suffer from anxiety?
Not really.
Armpit fish.
Okay. Yeah.
Is one of your feet a full size larger than the other? I'm telling you, armpit fish. Now,
tell me more.
Yes, indeed. I thought you might ask. What this is an ancient Asian remedy, newly rediscovered in the deep jungles of Myanmar. There's a certain species of fish that lives only in one small stretch of the tiny Mangti River. They are very small and red in color and have tiny spines on their back that, if you press them into your armpits, will lock them in place and hold them there for days on end. Sure, it's a little painful, but that's a small price to pay to cure your type 2 diabetes, don't you think?
Yeah, I'd pay any price for that.
Right?
And I don't even have it.
Yeah, exactly. So, you get a couple of these little guys up there for 2 weeks. You'll literally be healthy for a whole year. They cost a small fortune, but they're totally worth it because they're literally guaranteed to work. You will never get cancer. You literally can't get herpes. It's impossible. You're protected.
Wow.
Now, the source of the power lies in the river. The Maiting River, I don't know how to pronounce it. I just picked one at random. This is totally legit. Has the world's only supply of a compound called humonium. Scientists have tried, but no one's ever been able to synthesize this in a lab. It goes into the fish's food, becomes part of their bodies. It's so rare and prized in the fish that it's illegal to pull it out of the river.
Oh.
Nobody knows how it does what it does, but it's undeniable that it works. Nobody who lives along that river ever dies of disease, ever.
Wow.
They all live in comfort until they just drift away painlessly of deep old age. Now, there's only one thing that you have to do in order to assure that you'll never have alopecia again. You have to believe.
Oh, yeah.
You have to be 100% sure in your heart of hearts, whatever that means, that this will, in fact, work before you put the fish under your arms. Your certainty is the secret ingredient that activates the magic of the fish. Any amount of doubt lowers the chances that you'll get the help you need. But if you can muster the confidence and the $25,000 per fish, you will be healthy forever.
Wow.
What do you say? Can I put you down for a yearly fish subscription?
Give me some fish.
Right?
Yeah, give me some fish.
You're not sensing. No alarm bells are going off for you at all.
None.
At this moment.
None. Because you told me it was true.
Right?
Yeah.
Well, unfortunately, I've been lying to you. This has not been an actual offer of unlimited health. This has been a thought exercise, and I hate to say it, but I think you failed.
What?
Because
toss it on the pile.
Right, exactly. What we're talking about today is faith. The idea of faith.
That would be the 1989 George Michael smash hit.
The classic.
Yeah. Fantastic song. I love it. I still love it.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Music video was gorgeous.
Oh, yeah. Especially when he turned around. Anywho, so basically what we're talking about is a bunch of wild claims that can't be substantiated of powers that we would all love to have access to. Anecdotes offered as evidence. A bandwagon to jump onto. A little bit of an appeal to antiquity, a little appeal to, some unproven power.
Maybe an exaggeration here and there.
Sure, why not? Here's the thing. But the biggest part of this thing, and this is kind of what I want to talk about, is the out that I've given myself by saying that you have to believe first and then it works afterwards. The proof that it will work comes after it's too late to go back. Well, nobody would jump out of an airplane and get the proof that you're wearing a parachute on the way down.
Right.
For anything important, we want real evidence that it will succeed before we try the thing.
I don't know, Dan. Have you met the about 40% of American voters?
Right?
Yeah.
We'll get to them.
Okay.
When we hit Voltaire a little bit later.
I knew it. I knew Voltaire was going to come up, for fuck's sake.
You can't avoid him. He's unavoidable in this conversation. But the thing is, in a situation like this, the shit of it is that in the deal that I've offered, if the parachute doesn't work, I get to look at your splattered body on the ground and say, well, guess he didn't believe enough. And that is the paradox of faith. And that's what I want to discuss with you, because to be a believer, there could be no important concept than faith. Yeah, it's all they talk about.
Yeah.
Am I right?
Yeah, of course.
So what the fuck is faith? The Bible has a cute little definition, which is in Hebrews 11. It says, now faith is the assurance of things hoped for, the conviction of things not seen. Did that mean anything to you?
Yeah, I think that's pretty accurate.
I puzzled over that for a minute, and it still doesn't mean anything to me. But maybe the Book of Mormon can make it more clear.
That's where we look for clarity, guys.
Yes, exactly. Alma 32. Everybody loves the Book of Alma. Quote, faith is not to have a perfect knowledge of things. Therefore, if ye have faith, ye hope for things which are not seen, which are true. Now, parse that out at your peril, because I'm pretty sure that sentence was designed by M.C. Escher.
Yeah, exactly. I was going to say that is a very classic kind of Mormon philosophical fucktangle, right? It's just
exactly.
It's self-negating at the same time that it's trying not to be.
Right.
Yeah.
Because what if the unseen thing that I hope for is not true? Is that also faith? If not,
right.
How the fuck would I know the difference?
Right.
The Greek word in the New Testament that is translated to faith is pistis, which could also be translated to belief or trust. Lots of other definitions exist too, but what it ends up meaning is that is just sort of what we all think it means: belief in something that can't be proven. Now, theologians will tell you that faith isn't blind or irrational. They'll talk until they're blue in the face about the logical reasons to have faith. John Calvin, he was a real peach. I don't know if you know.
Yeah, he was. I believe he was described as friend to all children.
That's terrifying.
There's an old Soviet poster that shows Stalin with a boy sitting on his lap, and they're like coloring or something on the table, and the caption is Stalin, friend to all children. Okay. Yeah.
Well, I'm talking about John Calvin.
Well, I think they're similar characters, so yeah.
Yeah, they must be the same. Anyway, Calvin defined faith as, quote, a firm and certain knowledge of God's benevolence toward us, founded upon the truth of the freely given promise in Christ, both revealed to our minds and sealed upon our hearts through the Holy Spirit. See? It's revealed to our minds and sealed upon our hearts by a ghost. That's good, right?
By a fucking ghost.
The theological concept of evidence revolves around two things. Calvin's certainty as revealed by a special feeling that we have to attribute to God and nothing else. Or the testimony of witnesses.
Yes.
Theologian Peter S. Williams points out that in the book of John, Thomas doubted that Jesus had returned from the dead, even though his friends were saying that it happened.
Yeah.
Now, Williams says, quote, Thomas wasn't asked to believe without evidence. He said that Thomas was asked to believe on the basis of the other disciples' testimony. Thomas initially lacked the first-hand experience of the evidence that had convinced them. Now, I don't know what Bible Peter S. Williams was reading, but doubting Thomas didn't take the other disciples up on that offer.
No, he stuck his goddamn fingers in the spear hole.
Yeah, exactly. Jesus actually had to come, and Thomas actually had to touch those wounds.
Yeah.
He literally got the proof he needed.
Yeah, and then he was convinced.
Shouldn't that be the guiding star of believers everywhere?
Right.
It's in their book.
Right.
But, you know, believing when you have ample evidence is a great point to a story. But no, later in that chapter, the moral is explained. Quote, Jesus performed many other signs in the presence of his disciples, which are not recorded in this book, but these are written that you may believe that Jesus is the Messiah, the Son of God, and that by believing you may have life in his name. So, the story of Thomas is a shell game. You don't need evidence. That guy already got the evidence, and he swears it's true. Right. So all you need to do is believe that guy.
But what's hilarious is that it is still, the entire story is predicated on firsthand evidence.
Right. Exactly. So, yeah.
The guy's a fucking apostle. You can't take the apostle's word for it, right? Or you have to, it's stupid.
Well, yeah, he didn't take the other apostles' words for it,
right.
So why should I take his word for it?
Right.
Come to me, Jesus. Show me your wounds and etc. I don't know about you, but I find the testimony of dudes 2,000 years ago a little sketchy.
Yeah.
So faith is the big ask that makes people ignore all the smoke and mirrors in religion. We Mormons are very familiar with a Bible scripture from James chapter 5 because the story goes that Joseph Smith was looking at all the versions of Christianity around him and confused about which one to join. So he saw this scripture, and it really changed him, how he saw things. Quote, if any of you lack wisdom, let him ask of God that giveth to all men liberally, and upbraideth not, and it shall be given him. But let him ask in faith, nothing wavering, for he that wavereth is like a wave of the sea, driven with the wind and tossed. Boom!
So if you lack faith, you can ask for it, but don't ask for it unless you have 100% faith.
Right.
100%.
That is the way that is constructed.
Yeah.
If you don't know, start by knowing, and then ask, and then you'll know.
Yes. But be certain when you ask. Because then you won't be able to know unless you're already certain.
Right.
Yeah.
With the added benefit of plausible deniability on God's part that if it doesn't work, it's your fault, you wavering sea wave son of a bitch.
Yeah.
So there you go. And this is repeated all over the Bible. In Matthew, and whatever you ask in prayer, you will receive if you have faith. Okay. Great. Again, the out, you know what I mean? Like, I'll ask for lots of things, and then if I don't get them, my fault.
Right.
In Mark, it says, overhearing what they said, Jesus told him, don't be afraid, just believe. Faith is used as a threat in John. Unless you believe that I am who I claim to be, you will die in your sins. Yee. And it's
sold.
Used as... Right. It's used as a powerful incentive in elsewhere in Mark. this is Mark 11. And Jesus answered them, "Have faith in God. Truly I say unto you, whoever says to this mountain, 'Be taken up and thrown into the sea,' and does not doubt in his heart, but believes that what he says will come to pass, it will be done for him. Therefore I tell you, whatever you ask in prayer, believe that you have received it, and it will be yours."
I think that is provably true because no people of great faith have ever died in an accident.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah, exactly. I love that in my research for this, I encountered so many believers talking about the power of faith to move mountains, because none of them seems to have demanded that it happen. They all know intrinsically and deeply that if they were to attempt to move a mountain into the sea, they would fail.
Yes.
Regardless of their level of faith.
Yeah.
Produce your most faithful human and tell them to cast a mountain into the sea, and we'll all gather and we'll watch.
I would be cool with just a hill. It doesn't even have to be a mountain that anybody would miss, just kind of a medium-sized hill. I'd be incredibly impressed.
Dude, if you could make a sand dune throw itself into the ocean, David Copperfield would shit a brick.
Yeah, just a Volkswagen. Let's start small and see how much how much megatonnage your faith has when it comes to geology.
Yeah. If you're worried that one person can't do it, get 1,000 people.
Yeah.
And pray till your faces fall off that mountain's going to go into the ocean. Guess what? It ain't.
Yeah.
Is the answer that we're looking for. What's amazing to me is that Jesus said it would work.
Yeah.
It's red letter Bible shit. It's straight out of his mouth. And honestly, what a great tool it would be if anybody could do it. How many of us would actually reconsider our heretical positions if we saw that mountain get moved?
Yeah.
I would.
Yeah.
All you have to do is actually make that happen as it's promised that you will by Jesus himself. And you'll have a lot of people really reconsidering their heresies.
And history is replete with, and let's just stick with Christians, with faithful people, Christians of all stripes, who in moments of crisis maybe have called for that to happen.
Yeah.
And it never happened.
How many poor souls of genuine faith, just really earnest believers have tried this experiment.
Yeah.
And then have to come to one of two awful conclusions. Either A, their faith isn't good enough, or B, the thing that they have faith in is bullshit. So it's not an easy thing. Also, does that whatever you ask in prayer, believe that you have received it and it will be yours concept sound a little familiar? Because that's, if Oprah said it, we'd all say, "Oh yeah, it's The Secret, of course." I guess so. What's the harm is a big question that I've seen on the internet. Maybe faith doesn't make sense logically. So what? If it makes people happy or gives them comfort, then what's the big deal? Well, hello, Voltaire. Here we are.
Finally,
we got to it.
Yeah.
It's his notion that seems to prove true every single time we on this show talk about another religion, a cult, or whatever, which is, quote, "Those who can make you believe absurdities can make you commit atrocities." We've got these really dumb ape brains. And man, once you buy into something that doesn't actually pass intellectual muster, you are on the road to more and more nonsense. And eventually you can be led to some truly terrifying things. Yeah.
I mean, I think when you say ape brains, the way I think of the human mind is that it's a Ferrari, but the person operating it is 12 years old. Right? It's way too much. It's way more than most people need or can use. So,
well, and unfortunately, it's it's loaded up with things that are fairly retrograde for its use. Like, it's amazing at what it can do, but it has literally built into it cognitive biases left and right. The best way that we've figured out for how to think about things, which we call the scientific method, we have to build in tricks to trick our own brains so that they don't fuck it all up for us. Like, the whole concept of double blinding a study so that the person that you're giving the drug to doesn't know if they're getting the drug or the placebo. And also, the doctor who's giving it doesn't know if it's the drug or the placebo. It has to happen, because if you don't do that, we have learned that doctor who is trained in science and wants to know the real outcome of this study will fuck it up. His brain or her brain will unconsciously screw with the results if we don't trick it into not knowing anything.
Right. And
that's
and
how
he knows
fucked up
that's
our brains
happening,
are.
and he's smart enough to know why that has to happen, and he could still trick himself.
Yeah. We are bad at thinking. And the second we think we've got it figured out, and believe me, I know some very smart people. I know some of the smartest people. And
I'm right here, Dan. I'm just, you don't have to play like this. I'm right here.
Yeah, you know some smart people too.
I do.
And all of them have incredibly flawed thinking. We all do it. There are some places where we're incredibly clear in our thinking, and some places where we have amazing blind spots. And the thing about faith is that it asks us to believe before evidence.
Yes.
And that is exactly the opposite of what we should ever do.
Yeah, and that's why I think when we were on Doug Fabrizio's podcast years ago, when we were first starting out, Dan, I kind of mentioned the thing that, look, I grew up in Salt Lake City. I still live in Salt Lake City. Almost every doctor, dentist, neurologist, specialist of every medical sort I've ever been to is probably a Mormon.
Right.
And these are people who have spent their lives in evidence-based methodology with this, through the scientific method. Yep. Yet they believe in something that we, I think, have ably demonstrated over 160 something episodes is pretty fucking preposterous. Right.
Yeah.
And so it's
utterly absurd.
You can be both things at once. You can be an incredibly smart person, right, and understand, kind of the basic mechanics of the universe and the natural world, and also believe things that demand those things either aren't true or that you suspend that knowledge to believe in these things. So it is even, they're just dumb people or maybe uninformed people or maybe not terribly well educated or whatever, who've never have learned how to think clearly, that sure, they can believe in crazy stuff and bizarre supernatural things. But it's odd that the incredible credulousness that most faith requires and an incredible education can exist in the same head.
It's astounding. Yeah. And, people, and one thing that we learn when we look at the world also is that, somebody can be well-trained in medicine, can be a doctor, and also be an idiot about human health. So,
right.
There are no guarantees in our dopey little brains. But I can tell you this one thing. Your hope, the things that you hope for, and the things that you can't see are not good reasons to believe in them.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
When Hebrews tells us that faith is the assurance of things hoped for, nope, that's a bad thing.
Yeah.
Your hope is probably one of those things that's guaranteed to make your thinking worse.
Yeah.
Make your reasoning and your logic go a little bit wiggledy-wobbledy. So when people tell you to have faith because you're hoping, or when people ask you to have faith first, and then you'll get the assurance that it's true after the fact, run away.
Yeah. And especially if the reveal of the product they're trying to sell you, the reveal doesn't happen till after you die.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, exactly.
But they're asking you to modify.
And you've got to give money the entire time while you're alive.
Right. And you have to materially and experientially, I can't even say that, Dan, diminish this life in order to receive the trophy on the other side of the veil. That is crazy.
Yeah.
Super crazy. So
not a good bet to take.
Yeah.
Don't take that bet, everybody. And talk your friends out of it too.
Yeah. George Michael song, great. Way to live a life, bad.
If you want the armpit fish, write into how-to@howtoheretic.
We got to make a living, guys.
All right. Well, that's good enough. Let's move on.
All right. Thanks, Dan. Let's move on.
Hey, Uncle Mark.
Hello.
As shocking as it is to believe, and we say it every week, people listen to our show.
Yes.
I don't know who they are. They're out there in the ether. We can't meet them because somebody's going to give somebody COVID if we do.
That's right. I know they're there because they yell at me in the emails.
Yes, indeed. And there they are. And some of them even like the show. And some of those people like the show so much and have the wherewithal that they give us some money.
Yeah.
And that is something that pleases us greatly.
Yep.
And we're sure grateful for it. So we got some folks to thank. And we're going to just launch in with you giving a improvised saint to Ashley.
Aha. Ashley, the big book of saints. Let me dust her off here.
Yeah.
Carry the 4. Jupiter in Aries. And, boy, did you draw one. You, Ashley, are going to be under the protection of a big one. This is Saint Megapancetta of Telluride.
Oh, wow.
Yeah,
That's the best of the pancettas.
It is the biggest of the pancettas. It's the largest of the pancetta family.
Yeah.
And she is the patron saint of anyone who committed a crime of some kind under the influence of Ambien and can't remember it, but they're doing time anyway.
That is a lot of people for Mega Pancetta to cover.
Yeah, that's a lot of people. And any and all Oliver Cromwell reenactor impersonator types.
Okay, sure.
Yeah.
Those maybe a slightly smaller number.
Yeah, I don't know, a dozen maybe, and
you never know.
And then or probably less, and the grounds crew at the Augusta National Golf Club.
Oh, wonderful!
Yep.
Well, there you go.
Congratulations to everyone involved in that.
Yeah, especially anyone who wants to cut off the head of King Charles. You're covered, and Ashley, you are a lucky person. And also, we need to thank someone who's coming in at the heaven level.
Unbelievable.
One Meryl.
Meryl, thank you so much.
Our newest hero, who we're going to now honor with. She gets her own. And none of the rest of you are invited. Heaven.
Do we know Meryl is a lady person?
Oh, I don't. Did I say she? I didn't.
Yeah, I don't know.
She.
I don't know either way. So
sorry about that, Meryl. We don't know your pronouns, but
in addition to heaven, you are being assigned a gender.
Yes, that's right. That's right. We have this power.
Yeah,
you're she now. That's for at least one day.
Yes,
you are she.
Give it a whirl.
So, yeah, have some fun with it. Who knows? Meryl, your afterlife opens on a beautiful heath. What's a heath? I'm an American, so I have no idea. But there you are. It's sunrise over the countryside, and a gentle dew tops the grasses as you walk through. In the distance, tucked into a nearby forest, you see a small encampment. The folks there seem a happy lot, so you decide to approach. A tall, bearded man walks up to you, claps a hand on your shoulder, smiles, and says, "Sit down and feed, and welcome to our table. And take upon command what help we have that to your wanting may be ministered." Suddenly, very hungry, you sit down and begin scarfing up the food they've generously offered. As you eat, one of them, conspicuous in his grumpiness, looks at you and goes into a long explanation of the various stages of humanity. This curmudgeon pontificates on the haplessness of the human condition from birth to old age, but he speaks so well that you enjoy it in spite of yourself. Suddenly, in the distance, you hear a horn blast and the beating of a drum. You run over a nearby hill and find an army being rallied by a handsome young leader. The men are worried that they are very outnumbered. One says something about wishing that the thousands of men they had back home in England were here to fight with them. The young leader gives a rousing speech about not wanting to share the honor of that day with even one more man. By the end, he has declared every soldier there his brother, and even you, who have no desire to fight, or even any sense of what the hell this war is about, are ready to go to battle. But before you can, you're whisked away into a castle. You look down and find you're now suddenly in a lovely gown. Two men are telling you a plan. They're going to hide and listen in while you try to get a guy to tell you why he's acting crazy. This, like the other moments, feels very familiar. And finally you realize what's going on. You, dear Meryl, have died and gone to heaven. Shakespearean heaven. And you're about to meet Hamlet. You tuck yourself into a dark corner of the large room, and sure enough, in comes the handsome young prince, talking to himself about suicide. To be or not to be? That is the question. As he continues, you find yourself enthralled by the passion of his words. You're moved by the obvious anguish that underlies his dilemma, and just want to reach out and comfort him. Suddenly, out of the corner of his eye, he spots you. "Soft you now," he says, "the fair Ophelia. Nymph, in thy orisons be all my sins remembered." You hesitate, but then move to respond. "My lord!" Suddenly, you're grabbed by the arm and dragged away. "No! You wanted to talk to Hamlet! You have remembrances of his that you have longed to redeliver! Why are you being pulled away? This is one of your favorite scenes!" You turn to see who is grabbing you, and you see a powerful man with a bent back. He looks out at the courtyard where his brother is being crowned king. "Now is the winter of our discontent made glorious summer by this son of York." Okay. You like this one too, and it's great. He's deliciously devious, a delightful agent of chaos, but just as he finishes, you turn to find yourself in a different chamber of a different castle. A man in a crown is told his wife has died, but he doesn't look devastated. He looks defeated. Tomorrow, and tomorrow, and tomorrow creeps in this petty pace. It's a great speech, but you're starting to get dizzy. You're hearing some of the most beautiful drama ever written, but you're only getting the highlights. It's all the most famous speeches without any of the context. Whoosh! You're in a crowd surrounded by togas. "Friends, Romans, countrymen, lend me your ears." You love this one, but come on. This is a little much. Oh well, Meryl. This is your iambic pentametric heaven, that undiscovered country from whose bourne no traveler returns. Is your will puzzled? Well, death's a fearful thing, and I suppose this is better than to lie in cold obstruction and to rot. Right? Right? Well, that's it. There you go, Meryl. You got your heaven.
Curtain.
And scene.
Yeah, I was there with you for a lot. Look, I'm gonna be blunt about it. I think that your Richard III was fantastic.
Okay, thank you.
But I really think you undersold the Henry V.
Yeah. I'm too old. I'm too old to play him these days.
Are you? Because that's a barn burner, that speech.
Yeah.
Kenneth Branagh, it's a spittle-flecked, camera-dousing speech. But you did it.
Yeah, we made it through, and Meryl gets to keep experiencing it over and over again because she, in her generosity, has given us her money, just like all of our listeners could do, if they have money and if they feel the inclination. So go to the How to Heretic website, which is just howtoheretic.com. Find the support us button.
Right at
click
the top.
it. It's right. It's easy to see.
Yeah.
And then it'll just take you right to where you need to be.
Click the thing, put the money. It's that simple, right?
It is that simple. That's our new motto, by the way.
That's our new motto. And if you have money or you don't, stars are free. Why you being so goddamn stingy with the stars? That's what I'm saying.
Yeah. Yep.
Instar us. Spangle us.
5 stars only, never 3, never 4.
Yep.
If you give us 1, then we'll just assume you're a Christian, and that's the worst thing. So,
yeah.
There you go. Let's keep on moving.
Let's move on.
Hey, Mark.
Yeah.
Can I just ask you when was the last time you showered?
Oh,
this is a COVID times are weird times.
in the before time, I think.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
I figured. I would call you unpure. Then I'm afraid to say.
Well, in more ways, yes. It certainly outside. The outside should match the inside, I suppose.
Well, yeah, that seems like a thing.
Yeah.
But purity is not my particular point of expertise. I don't have one of those. So I think you've brought someone along to talk to us about the subject. That's better suited than either of us.
But let me introduce our guest this way, and that is to say that we have a huge range of listeners all across the religious spectrum, from old-time atheists to people that are still religious in some way, people that love the Jesus, but they've found maybe a less toxic place to commune with him rather than where they were raised, where they came from.
Can I just say that you used the phrase old-time atheist, and now all I can think of is like a honky-tonk piano in a bar with 2 guys going, well, I don't believe in God either, see?
I believe less than you, sir.
But I don't think that's what you mean. I think I understood what you meant. So keep going with what you're saying.
So we, in the years we've been on the air, we get requests for all kinds of topics because we cover all kinds of different stuff. What is the number one requested topic, Uncle Dan?
It's got to be sex, right?
Well, you've hit very close to the mark, and that is people want us to discuss purity culture. Ew. So we decided to get somebody who knows what the fuck they're talking about with that subject, who is Linda Kay Klein, who has written a book on the subject called Pure: Inside the Evangelical Movement That Shamed a Generation of Young Women and How I Broke Free. Linda, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me.
First question, what are you wearing? No, I'm sorry. That was wrong.
I feel like I can hear bare shoulders, and it's making me freak out. So yeah, you have a little personal experience from purity culture, don't you?
I do indeed. Yeah, I was raised in purity culture myself. In the heart of evangelicalism in the Midwest. There are so many hearts to evangelicalism. I could say the same thing for so many other places, but yeah. That question of what are you wearing is certainly one that I've been asked many times over the course of my life, and has been assessed, from I would say the age that I started to understand myself as somebody who was viewed by the outside world, not just somebody who was. Right? That transition from girldom to something else.
Can I just have you, Linda, maybe define what we're talking about when we say purity culture?
Yes. So, I would say that there are so many different aspects of this. Purity culture is the culture that's created when we look at the world as a binary that divides people into the 2 categories of pure and impure. And specifically, people are divided into pure and impure based on other people's perceptions of their sexuality, of their gender performance, these other things that are an assessment of others, of your thought life, your feelings, right? Whether or not you're quote unquote inspiring sexual thoughts or feelings in someone else by, say, the answer to that question, what are you wearing? And also, of course, your activity, right? Your sexual activity. Now, pure and impure, these aren't, valueless concepts, right? This binary fits over a much larger binary, which is the binary of good and bad,
Right.
And if you're a religious person, and I would argue that though purity culture is often something that we talk about in Christian culture, certain Christian cultures, it's certainly something close to purity culture, or perhaps purity culture itself, depending on how you define it, is found in lots of different religious cultures and cultures in general. But
is that the purity police coming to get you?
Yeah,
right now,
I think you're in trouble. Run!
they found you. Cover up, woman.
This is life in New York City for you. So I apologize in advance. This might happen again. Every time you hear the siren, you'll know that we're touching on some dangerous ground.
Yeah,
that's right.
But anyway, if you're experiencing this purity message in a religious community, it usually also means saved or unsaved, right? One of us, or destined to burn in some way, shape, or form.
Right.
Now, there was a movement, if I may just go a little bit further, there was the purity movement, on the other hand, is a movement that was born out of the white evangelical Christian church in the late 80s, early 90s. And that spurred the purity industry, which is when we start to see just all these products, right? We start to see purity rings and purity pledges, which weren't in and of themselves, something that people purchased, but came with these big events, right? These concerts, these, places where you could buy T-shirts and you could buy coffee mugs and you could buy, almost anything, right?
Daddy-daughter dances, that sort of thing.
Sure. Purity-themed Bibles even, right? Where there's additional text added to the Bible all about the importance of your purity.
Within the books of the Bible, or is it an addendum?
An addendum is how I remember it. Yeah, there's two. So, yeah.
Wow.
So truly an industry. So all these things I kind of think of as a little bit distinct from one another. But, I think purity culture is a nice kind of catch-all term that says, so this is the culture that is created by all of this intentional effort.
Yeah. And again, that is something, I think that the purity industry is probably more a creature of the evangelical world. But again, the kind of shaming, especially of young girls and young women, is pretty prevalent in, I would say almost every strain of American Christianity on some level. Getting back to what I was saying earlier, you were everything was going relatively fine, right? You were a young evangelical, and I know you had some health problems when you were away at school that began to kind of change your view of things. And then you decided to go to college.
Yeah. So I, first of all, first applied to Bible college, as every good, evangelical does. And 2 weeks before I was supposed to go to Bible college, I changed my mind. And I sat my parents down and I said, I don't think that I want to become a missionary after all, which had actually been my intention.
Whoa.
To be a missionary who was also an actress, and who would therefore, perform with her very cute missionary husband, right?
Right.
That was the goal, is you would kind of put on shows around the world, and
yeah. But 2 weeks before, I said to my parents, I don't think I want to be a missionary anymore. A lot had happened over the course of my years that made me start to feel like it, I was still an evangelical, but it wasn't something that I wanted to make my life a spokesperson for.
Right.
And so my parents, I feel very blessed, said to me, well, you don't have to transfer after the first year, as you just said, to a secular college. Why don't you just go to a secular college?
That is kind of lucky. That sounds like not every parent would say something like that.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. A lot of my peers would not have had that conversation,
Mm-hmm.
In fact, many of my peers, the situation was their parents would pay for college only if they went to a Christian
Right.
college,
Yep.
right?
Yep.
So my folks were great. They said, take a year off. I took a year off. I worked at Pier 1 Imports, right? I went to community college and I researched secular colleges for the first time in my life. And I ended up applying and going to Sarah Lawrence College.
Which is
And
amazing. I love it.
had never heard of Sarah Lawrence before. And if any of your listeners have also never heard of Sarah Lawrence, it is a liberal arts school, emphasis on the liberal,
Yeah.
and just a very, very liberal place. One of the places that you go if you want to explore sexuality, if you want to transition genders, it's a real safe space for that kind of exploration. And I
Right.
had absolutely
No idea. And it is probably one of the most entrenched feminist institutions in the country, I would imagine, right?
Absolutely.
So
You apparently got the trick brochure that tells you, that doesn't tell you all the stuff.
Well, I mean, actually, the brochure that I remember, and a lot of my friends remember it too, and we talk about it all the time, said, "You are different," and then it said, "So are we." And I remember, growing up an evangelical, feeling like I never fit in. I was just never good enough for some reason, usually having to do with my body or, being perceived as flirting or whatever it was that I had done wrong that day. And then of course I get to Sarah Lawrence and I realized that being different wherever these people came from was very different than it was where I came from. and
You were the same kind of different.
Yeah, I became known on campus as like, so normal that it was a joke, right? Like one of my nicknames was the token straight girl.
Oh,
In my group of friends, I got called the Gap Girl because I shopped at the Gap, which was apparently very uncool, very mainstream and lame. So it was a massive transition, and I was suddenly exposed to an absolutely different worldview and very different approach to sexuality, to the body, to what it is to be a human being, and to try to negotiate, the world.
Can you talk a little bit about the special event that you participated in at Sarah Lawrence? I believe it was Sex Workers Week.
Well, I didn't participate in Sex Workers Week, but no, the week was called Sleaze Week.
Oh, Sleaze Week.
It was a week of school-sponsored events. Like poor Sarah Lawrence, like there must be like, why is she telling people that we paid for this for Sleaze Week? But it was school-sponsored events. It was a series of events where there was a sex worker, right? Who came in, and it was a celebration of sex work, was part of what Sleaze Week was about, but it was also where the sadomasochistic dance, took place, right? It was where the sex worker came in and gave a workshop where they taught people how to find their G-spot, complete with a invitation to come up and put on a rubber glove and find her G-spot, have her walk them through.
Wow.
Right? So yeah, it was definitely, and that's very early. That was very early in my time. In fact, that week, I remember my first year of college, they realized that Sleaze Week they had inadvertently planned it for the same week as Parents' Week.
Oh my God. That's amazing. Did your parents come?
No. We're from the Midwest. It was too long of a trip for them. But yeah, so I remember, it's pretty early on in campus life to be exposed to.
Your mind must have been blown right out of your ears.
Absolutely. A naked parade where people were walking around campus naked, celebrating their bodies.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
How did you respond to that? Were you terrified? Were you titillated? What was this sort of evangelical Midwestern girl's response to all of this, to this baptism by fire?
Well, what I participated in, if this is perhaps what you were referring to about my participation, I don't remember if it happened during Sleaze Week, but there was a sex education cabaret. And I was cast by somebody who was working on the cabaret as Martha Stewart. Because I was, the Gap girl, token straight girl. I was clearly the one to be cast as Martha Stewart. And I would, in this sketch, I would, and in fact, this was, by the way, years before Sarah Lawrence had this exact same character, or before Saturday Night Live had this exact same character. I would demonstrate during this cabaret as Martha Stewart how to use household items to, in sexual ways, right?
Oh, that's awesome.
Like saran wrap at the dental dam. So, so here I am sort of, engaging with this because I feel like in many ways it felt incredibly liberating, right? I was like, oh my gosh, you can not have deep, overwhelming sexual shame and fear and anxiety.
You can actually laugh and have fun.
Yeah. But the second part of the story, which is equally true, is that though on the surface I was able to, be in the safe sex cabaret, that's what it was called. It was called the Safe Sex Cabaret. Even though I was able to on the surface, be part of something even like that, I was still utterly overwhelmed by my own deep sexual shame. To the point where when I, over my time at Sarah Lawrence, eventually came to my long-term boyfriend and said, I've done a lot of thinking. I think that I want to have sex before marriage, and we started to engage in, what we thought was going to lead us to having sex. And I learned that, in fact, what it was going to lead us to was me utterly breaking down in tears, every time, breaking down in tears, holding myself in a ball, my eczema coming out, scratching myself until I bled, and taking a pregnancy test afterward, though we hadn't had sex. And that went
just
on.
Because it was so psychologically terrifying, or?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the idea of impurity, when you're utterly surrounded by the notion that if you are impure, that means you're on the bad side of the binary.
Right.
You're on the non-Christian side of the binary. You're on the like never going to be loved, side of the binary.
Right.
You're on the dirty side of the binary. You're on the broken side of the binary. You're on the worthless side of the binary, Yeah. And so though I felt like I was able to process, and had come to a different point of view about sexuality, and, had actually even determined that it did not feel like a sin to me to have sex outside of marriage, though I had been taught it was. I had so deeply internalized the overwhelming shame that came from the message that it was, a message I didn't even believe anymore. Right.
But that's the programming, isn't it? Like when you're taught these things at such a young age, they can just lie dormant, right? It's almost like landmines.
Yes. Just
getting laid that even when you're years out of it, and this is a lot of what our correspondents, asking about purity culture say. So they're like, look, I've been out of the religion for 25 years, but this still blows up in my face.
Absolutely.
And when you talk about being on the bad side or the the devalued side of the binary, you have a story that you told that really relates to a story that we've talked about once or twice on the show before, which is the Elizabeth Smart kidnapping in what was the early 2000s, Dan?
I wasn't actually involved, so I don't remember the exact dates.
Well, they couldn't. Nothing has been proven.
Yeah, exactly.
But that was a huge local story here, and her face was on every mailbox and light pole, and there were hundreds of people scouring the hillsides and the mountains to look for her. And, she luckily survived her ordeal and has talked about later that, the first rape that occurred in her captivity was within the hour of her abduction. Mm-hmm. And she had hundreds of opportunities after that to pull the veil from her face. Everyone in the country knew what she looked like, right? It was such a celebrity kidnapping. But she didn't do it. And it was because she remembered that a teacher at a public high school that she went to here in Salt Lake City had told the girls in the class that nobody would want to chew a used piece of gum. And I just think that is so despicable to put into the minds of of young people. And you have a similar story, don't you?
Yeah. So I want to talk about two things. I want to talk about object lessons, and I want to talk about public schools. So first, object lessons. So there are countless object lessons. I've spent the last 15 years interviewing people who are raised in, a variety of communities, but predominantly evangelical Christian churches. And one of the things that comes up over and over and over again is an object lesson. Mm-hmm. So many different kinds, right? The one that I explain in detail in the book is the Oreo, right? Mm-hmm. One of my interviewees tells a story about her teacher, again, a public school, raising an Oreo up in front of the room and saying, "Who wants this Oreo?" And everybody raises their hand, right? Everyone wants the cookie. And then she passes the Oreo around the room and she has each person spit on it or drop it on the ground. And when it gets back to her, she holds it up again and she says, "Now, who wants this Oreo?" Nobody raises their hand. And it's presented as an illustration of how disgusting and unwanted you are after having any sexual encounters, right?
Yeah.
And this is something that, Elizabeth Smart talks about the gum object lesson. There is a used car and a new car, a used bike and a new bike, a used Kleenex and a new Kleenex, a hamburger that has been devoured and a hamburger that, no one's touched yet, a sucker that's been devoured and a sucker that no one's touched yet, which feels like a real, it's double entendre. But, there's just a lot of ways that this metaphor that you are worthless and will never be loved,
and disgusting
and
too.
disgusting. Yeah. And what's interesting about public schools is that though this message, I associate as being a big part of the purity movement, this points to the fact that, well, two things. One, the purity movement was only successful because there was already a strong foundation of deep sexual shame, well laid in our culture, and I would argue most cultures. And so the purity movement, didn't present any new ideas, right? The idea that a woman would become disgusting and not take home to mom material the moment that you did anything sexual with her, that's not a new notion, right?
Right.
So first of all, the foundation. And then second of all, the movement, the purity movement, made a really intentional effort to spread this messaging well beyond the 25% of the country that is evangelical. And certainly the Mormon population has a very significant purity culture. But beyond these religious cultures. And one of the places that they put a lot of focus on was public schools.
Yeah.
And because so much funding for sexuality education in public schools is you'll only get federal money if you teach abstinence only, emphasis on only, before marriage, right? So you can't teach anything else. A lot of, I don't know if you've ever, hung out with a lot of sex educators, but sex educators don't tend to teach that curriculum.
No, right.
So
because that's not sex education,
right? So the curriculum that's out there that teaches that is the curriculum of the purity movement, is a curriculum that does not teach you anything about sex or sexuality, but teaches you shame.
Yeah.
Right.
And that was a huge push. As I recall, that was one of the big fights during the W. Bush administration, was pushing abstinence-only education into the public schools and trying to strip funding from any school that didn't do that. So I think it's been enormously effective, sadly.
Yeah, and still, still to this day.
And if I'm understanding you correctly, you're if I may try to encapsulate your position, you're against this. Is that
yeah.
You're taking the non-pro position on this. Tell us why is it bad to be an abstinence only to take that position, and what should be in its place?
Right. Well, I mean, it's actually really interesting because I think one of the things that adults really are quite afraid of when it comes to young people and young adults is choice and information. I think that adults feel like, oh my gosh, we just have to keep them in the dark.
Right.
They can't know that this stuff exists, because if they know it exists,
then they'll do it.
Then they'll surely do it, right? Then they'll be in horrible danger. So we can't give them any information about it,
of course.
And we just need to make it clear that you only need to know one thing, and that's don't, right?
Right.
Because if you know any more, maybe you'll choose, and oh my God, you'll probably almost definitely choose wrong.
Yeah.
So no information, no choices. And actually, what's really interesting is that the research shows that that abstinence only before marriage messaging, does not delay the first age of intercourse, and it does not decrease the number of sexual partners that someone actually has. So it's highly ineffective at doing what it proposes to do. However, actually giving people information, and giving them choices, and giving them, I think, something that's really, really absent, even in some of the good sexuality education models that are out there, not entirely to their, being their fault, because it's just not accepted, is not only giving them choices, but teaching them how to choose, right?
Right.
Like, how do you make a healthy choice? Here's all the information. Right?
Yeah.
Now, how do you make a healthy choice that is going to lead you to a respectful engagement with other people? Pacing yourself at the rate that is right, for you.
Right.
These types of things are things that ultimately end up getting robbed of people if they oftentimes have only ever learned the purity message, because as soon as the purity message is exposed as unhelpful at best, they have no other tools or resources.
Right. They're flying completely blind.
Totally.
And in, I would guess, a majority, I don't know how big a majority of cases, kids are doing it anyway. Right. And they're fumbling and they're flying blind and they're possibly putting themselves in different sorts of danger.
Yeah.
So, generation
no one
of
to talk to about it.
Yeah, and they have no one exactly. They can't go to their parents about it. They can't go to their community leaders, which in a lot of cases would be church leaders, about it.
Well, and their school counselors are proving just as worthless. It's like there's no adult in the adult room.
We've failed as a society on this whole front. It's just insane.
I actually do a lot of coaching for people who are recovering from purity culture, and I have this conversation with people sometimes, where they talk about, gosh, when I needed to learn, I went to these places, that I felt like I wasn't, supposed to go, right? The internet, in short,
Right.
Yeah.
And then felt so much shame and so much self-hatred. And we have to look back and say, okay, what other resources did that kid have, right?
Yeah.
Could they have gone to their parents? Could they have gone to their church? Like where could they have had the healthy discussions that they needed to have,
Well, and the problem is that, like, anyone who goes against their parents and says, hey, I'll talk to you about this, runs the risk of being imprisoned. You know what I mean? You can't go and talk to a teenager that you don't have a relationship with about sexuality.
That's true. Yeah. It is very complicated. It is very complicated.
So talk to us a little bit, excuse me. So talk to us a little bit about, you mentioned you being helpful in counseling people and helping people who have been traumatized by this, by this purity culture.
Shame-based culture, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Talk to us about what recovery looks like and how long, what might be necessary for that to happen.
Yeah. I mean, recovery, ranges dramatically in terms of how long it takes. Unfortunately, the first step, I'm sure that your audience has heard the term deconstruction, right? Mm-hmm. The first step is the taking apart, saying, here are all the things that I was taught. Okay, let me pull it all apart,
Right.
Let me lay all the parts down on the ground and look at them all,
Mm-hmm.
And then, after a period of time, you're able to say, okay, this actually maybe was useful for me, right? And this was remarkably harmful, and so you start to reconstruct afterward. But the deconstruction process is a destabilizing process. Right?
Yeah, it can be very painful.
Yeah. So how long that takes and how quickly you're able to deconstruct and then get into the next stage of reconstruct, varies dramatically, based on whether you have support, whether you have people to talk to, how deep the shame goes, but also, it's something that sometimes people will get into the deconstruction process and it'll be too hard and they'll end up going and they just say, never mind, never mind, never mind, never mind. Right.
Right.
Because all of a sudden you have nothing, right?
Yeah.
Eventually you'll reconstruct and you'll have some new foundation, some new understanding of the world. Right. But in the meantime, you don't know what's up. You don't know what's down. You don't know what's right. You don't know what's wrong. You don't know who you can trust. You don't know if you can trust yourself. You had a worldview that you were certain of at one point, and now you're not certain of it at all anymore. So can you trust anyone? Someone taught you that. Can you trust yourself? You believed that.
Well, especially because a lot of that, that cultural programming came from people you trusted implicitly, right? It's parents and clergy and, aunts and uncles. And so if you suddenly find that you can't trust what the most important people in your life, taught you was a value, who else can you trust? That's pretty devastating.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely. And keep in mind that, in these cultures, you're often being taught that the heart is deceitful and you are good only by grace, right?
Right.
You are inherently terrible, and hellbound.
You're far too broken to make these decisions.
Yeah, you're born broken, and you have to find a way to get well.
Yeah. So how do you then say, I'm gonna trust myself?
Right.
I'm gonna believe my own experience. I'm gonna believe
it's a gaslighting.
Yeah.
Everybody's been gaslit into not trusting their own eyes, ears, and heart on these things.
Yes.
Yeah. It's well, I think that's a very hopeful note to end on, Dan. But I do have one last question, Linda, and that is, do you have a picture of what Gap outfit you selected to wear to the S&M ball? I'm just wondering what's available. That's probably not in Gap Kids. It's probably is there like Gap After Dark?
Yeah, it's great. It's funny. I did a commercial in my hometown years ago, and I don't think you can find it online anywhere. I've tried, but I was wearing it wouldn't. Good luck, but I was wearing a full length down to the floor Gap jean dress,
Nice.
And a striped Gap sweater cardigan over it.
Woo.
So it's
You would have
hilarious.
fit right in my high school.
Yeah,
Yeah,
so I
totally.
really looked. I mean, it's funny because the commercial. I think I was 18, right?
Yeah.
And they paired me with a quote unquote husband for the commercial who was in his late 30s.
You fit right in Utah.
Kind of looked right. Yeah, I kind of was dressed like I was in my late 30s. But but if you don't mind, I would love to just share a little bit more because I know that we're ending on potentially a dark note. And I know so many people are really hungry to heal. And so I'd love to talk a little bit about my healing journey, if you don't mind. Do we have the time?
Of course. Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah. So for me, there were many years in which I was trying to go it alone and just figure this out on my own or figure this out with my new secular friends who had absolutely and utterly no idea what I was talking about.
Right.
And it wasn't until, I started to call up my girlfriends from back home in the evangelical church that I was still in touch with, even after ultimately leaving myself, and telling them about this debilitating shame that I was experiencing, that I started to realize I wasn't alone, because when I exposed myself, they, for the first time in their lives, told their stories, which were reflections of my own.
And they hadn't told anybody before, right? Because they just,
right.
Yeah.
We all thought we were the only ones. And that was 15 years ago, right?
Wow.
Purity culture wasn't a term. There were no blogs. There were no books. We didn't even know that there had been a purity movement, let alone that we were one of the first groups of adolescents to have grown up in it,
Right.
And so, after a few years of these kind of whispered conversations with some of my friends, and then starting to venture out and talk to people who I met other places who were raised in evangelical churches, I started to realize, okay, wait, this is actually I think a more common experience than I had anticipated. And so I moved back to my hometown. I did a year of formal interviews with every young woman from my church youth group who I could get a hold of that year, about their adult experiences with sex and gender and how the messaging we were raised with had impacted them. And then that led to interviews with people around the country on this topic. And that process actually is what I think was the most healing for me. It was the process of understanding my story within a larger context. There were others who were experiencing this. We were experiencing this for a reason, and the more that I could understand our story, the more that my story made sense. And, sometimes, how it is, it's so much easier when you hear someone else talk about something and you go, well, of course that's not shameful, right?
Right.
But, if it's you, you're like, I'm a wretch,
Yeah.
So there's something also about just hearing your story in the mouth of someone else and having an empathy for them and realizing that's me.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's why we encourage people to tell their stories, and people come on here and tell their stories, because I think there's more commonality than there is difference in a lot of them.
Yeah. And the differences are even instructive, right?
Yeah,
absolutely.
Yeah. So that's I just wanted to end on a hopeful note. And
well, that's not really our brand, so we're
I feel like you ruined it. We were bumming everybody out real good, and then you came along and fixed it for us.
Some expert. So, well, listen, Linda, if the people want to find out more about you, if they want to find your book, whatever, where can they find you out there in the world?
Yeah. Well, I have a nonprofit called Break Free Together, and we actually host story exchanges of different kinds for people to do exactly this kind of healing work.
Oh, excellent.
So people can find that at breakfreetogether.org. And I also have a personal website. So my personal website is Linda Kay Klein, and that's my middle name spelled out, KAY.com. And there you can read about the book. You can read about the one-on-one coaching for folks who are healing from this, and other things there.
Excellent. Well, we'll include that in the show notes, and find that picture for me. I'm really interested in the Gap S&M gear. So, well, thank you so much for coming on the show. This has been a wonderful conversation. I've learned a lot.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it.
Well, friends, that's it for this week's show.
Hey, we'd love to hear from you. If you have any purity culture paraphernalia that you'd like to show us, send us an email at howto@howtoheretic.com.
Or if you are Uncle Doug, leave us a voicemail at 903-88-HOW-TO, which is 903-884-6986. I'm also on Twitter at HowToHeretic.
It's true. Thanks again to our patrons.
And thanks to Cody Layton for editing the show.
And thanks to all of you for tuning in.
Bye, friends.
Ciao, ciao.